if we can get a good understanding that I'm never alone. You're never alone. None of us. We're never alone. And nothing I ever do is by myself, including giving this talk. Just for starters, if you hadn't shown up today, I would have no one to talk to. So I would just be talking to a blank screen. I wouldn't be very motivated or inspired to do that. So already you're part of it. But not only that, the energy of the group. I don't know most of you personally, but I feel I do know you in the ways that really matter. You care enough to have gotten up and get online today and be here for this. So I already see that you are interested in and wanting to develop that peace that's already inside. And you want to do something about the suffering that you see in the world. So even though you might not have yet committed to the 14 mindfulness trainings, which would put you in the brown jacket, and which is just a reminder. It's a nice reminder. When I put it on, I'm reminded of my vows of the 14. So even if you haven't done that, I know that in your hearts, you're concerned. You're concerned about what's going on out there. And what can we do? What can we do? And we can do a lot. But we have to begin here. As again, that guided meditation told us that the one or the I is basic to the collective. So I am a wave, but I belong to that ocean. You're each a wave, you belong to the ocean. And occasionally a tsunami comes along, and it might be a high wave that can, like Thai, that can really benefit many, many people. But again, he would say, well, he didn't do it, by himself. He wouldn't have been a Zen master if he hadn't had followers, if he hadn't had disciples. So we definitely enter R, and going forward, and in order to be effective, we need to remember that. We need to come together as a Sangha. If you live in a place where there isn't one, then establish one. It's not time to hang back or to be shy or to continue to sit on the cushion and worry or wonder. It's time for some engaged Buddhism, I believe, as a Sangha. I think we are mature enough as practitioners that we can make a real difference in the world. But of course, it begins here. And as Ty has said, and I'm sure all of you have read this or heard him say it on podcast or in person, his life is his teaching. So it's not only about the words, but it's how I conduct myself in the world, how I walk through the world. I know that people are watching. And they're particularly watching if I am very present. We know how when we are in Ty's presence or have been, it's impossible to take your eyes off that man. Why? Because everything he does, the smallest movement, is done mindfully. He never seemed to really walk, he seemed to glide. You could feel the energy of his presence. So powerful. He didn't even have to say anything. And for 7 years after his stroke, he continued to teach being present. I can tell you that he was there. He was there until the very last. I was still in Vietnam, and so I was able to go to Hue and see him, and he was there. So I've reflected this week on some ways that, some things that I myself have been involved in the past. So some ways that Sangha can make a difference. You might remember in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. And our Plum Village Sangha in the US, Ty gave a talk. He gave retreats in the fall of 2002. And And we began to organize, some of us then, and we had an online presence. Some of us volunteered for it, to invite people to call in or write in. I think that was the way it was done, the way I remember my part in it anyway. I would receive emails from people who were very angry because 9/11 had just happened the year before. And and now here we were about to bomb, and some were in favor of bombing. And so then it was my job to answer those letters and to be as skillful as I could be. So others were doing the same kind of thing in our group. So that was maybe some of the first active engagement of that kind, anyway, that really called for skillfulness, skillful means, for deep listening, for the skills that we were learning in our practice that I was involved in. That same year, so I came across this, or I might have forgotten it. I came across this. I've been cleaning out files, a fun thing to do when I come home. And I came across this. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's the Beaufort, South Carolina Gazette. It's a Sunday newspaper, and it has a large picture on the front page. And it says underneath it, or across the top, passionate about peace. So our little Sangha of 2 at the time in Beaufort organized a peace walk at the most visible place in the area, the waterfront park. We had 25 people show up that day, and I led it. And I began it by quoting Mother Teresa. I had a little locket on my neck that someone had given me. And the little locket said, "I can do no great things, only small things with great love." Mother Teresa, a quote from Mother Teresa. And so I started the peace walk that way, by saying that, and then saying, we can't do a lot about the bombs that are going to be dropped on Iraq, but we can come back here and be here and arrive in each moment with each step and be grateful and realize that right here, right now, there is peace. There are no bombs dropping on us. So we can bring forth this belief and this energy of peace, and it will ripple out and it will have a ripple effect. We don't know, and we may never know what the effect will be, but we're doing our part to be peaceful in this very unpeaceful world. Well, at the end of that first walk, I looked back and I think there were 3 people. Everybody else had left. We'd started with 25 and everybody else had, because a lot of people had shown up that day. They didn't know they'd never heard the word Sangha. They didn't know Thich Nhat Hanh. They didn't have a practice. And they had shown up with anger in their hearts. They wanted to carry placards. I asked them to put them away, because we were not actually an angry group of protesters. We were walking for peace. So I was simply emulating our Thai, our teacher, our dear teacher. That was very effective. And after that, we led a walk across the bridge. The foot of the bridge is right in the middle of downtown Beaufort, very high profile. I walked that every Sunday afternoon for 2 years, almost without fail. I happened to be in a situation in my personal life that kept me very still for 2 years. I wasn't traveling. I wasn't running up and down the road. I was doing that. I was committed to that. So I can tell you that peaceful walks in the community, especially if the community, which this one is, has a very high, they think, maybe still, that they are dependent on the military. That Beaufort is the site of the Parris Island Marine Base in the U.S., can't remember the name of it, but it's the air base. So the first 1,500 troops who went to Iraq for that war came from Beaufort leaving family behind. So immediately when we started our peace walks, signs went up in all the business, maybe all of the businesses, I don't know. Maybe there were a few who didn't do this. We support our troops. So it became, in some people's minds, that if you wanted peace, you were not supporting the troops. So that kind of thing can be very challenging, you know. And Ty met that, didn't he, during Vietnam, because he was walking for peace. He lost his ability to go home. He lost his passport. They took it away. Because when people want to win, they're not looking for peace. They just want to win. And of course, we know that when you win a war, you might have won the battle, but you really haven't won anything, because we don't create peace with anger or with force or with violence. We just continue that anger and force and violence. So we ourselves as practitioners must, I believe, step forward in these days. It's not a time for the faint-hearted. It's not a time to be concerned about whether all of your circle of friends will like what you're doing. I think it's time that we have to step up and really be proactive as a Sangha, and we can do it. I would love to see all of our Sanghas in the U.S. and everywhere else for that matter, taking a stand, doing something as a group, practicing together for that inner peace, but then going out and letting people see that. Don't go into a closed room and close the door, and there you are with your nice, comfortable friends that everyone know. You know each other and you feel comfortable together and you enjoy coming together. That's wonderful. We have to have that. But then open that door and go out. The way Thai went out in Vietnam, when he and Sister Chang Kong and they formed the School for Social Services, and they said, we can't just sit here and meditate. Bombs are dropping around us. We have to do something. As Thai says, when you know something, you must do something. When you know there's injustice, something must be done. You must do your part. I must do my part. I want to show you something. Again, I don't know if you can see this. I'm sitting in a room that has that on the wall. You can't see it. It is a colored chalk painting or drawing that I found in my mother's attic after she passed 33 years ago. She had saved all of my school things. And I had produced that when I was in 5th grade. And I'm sure I copied something, but it's a drawing of the 3 wise men on their camels. And there is something like you'd see in the desert, a building in the distance, and the star is in the east. So they have heard the call. And it took my daughter to notice when we found this and went to frame it. Mom, she said, you knew even in 5th grade, the wise men have red lips. I gave them lipstick. So they're not wise men, they're wise women. So, and I think, oh my gosh, of course. And so what is it about, why do I bring that up? Because the feminine energy that our men have plenty of too, that heart energy, we have to call on that. Of course, we're supported by our masculine energy. That's why we hold our left hand, the heart side. We hold it with our right hand, the masculine side. The masculine side, the energy that puts us out in the world. So we have to, we support that heart. And we, with our masculine energy, so it's time for all of us to step up, including our women, the women who have, in our society, have too long, the majority of, stood behind the man. We got to step around, step forward, do our part, bring more love into the world, and action. Action. So what else? It was something else. Well, I was recently in Arizona in April. Met with a small group of us met with two men from Saudi Arabia who are PhD candidates at the Arizona State University in Tempe in water management. They have been sent there by their government to study water management. We met with them and they made us traditional coffee, the most delicious coffee I've ever tasted. It didn't taste like coffee exactly. It was a cross between coffee and tea. So they told us about their culture, and we talked a lot that evening. And they told us that they know, and the professors there at Tempe know, that within 20 years, that valley that Phoenix is in will be out of water. Certainly, they're not the only. That's not the only area in the U.S. that's challenged by that, by what's happening with our water, either overuse, misuse, contamination, pollution. So, if something like that is happening in your community, do something. Do something about it. I just read that actually there in 10 states, some state legislation has actually given personhood to some bodies of water. So that body of water, people on behalf of that body of water can bring a suit against a company that's polluting it. How amazing is that? I just watched a TED Talk given by a woman from one of our Native American tribes in California. And she said, their belief, it was all about water. Their belief is that water is alive and that water holds memory. Water is sacred. Water is life. So I guess what I hear myself saying is pick a cause. There are many of them. That's an antidote to depression, to feelings of helplessness and feeling overwhelmed. And, I can sit here and I can feel that too if I allow it. But when I'm doing something like this, I know I'm doing my part. I've reached a stage in my life where mostly I sit and talk now, and that's fine. I have a lot to share because I've engaged in a lot in my life, or I've experienced a lot in my life. I came across this. Several of us, this was again the Beaufort paper. This was just before we started bombing Iraq in 2003. We paid several $100s. We pooled our money together. It wasn't actually the Sangha because we didn't have a very organized Sangha at that point. I was just arriving there. We took out a half-page ad, Peace on Earth. May everyone be free of anxiety, fear, and hatred. May we each be an instrument of peace. May we be courageous as we confront fear. May we be wise as we confront injustice. May we be faithful as we confront despair. May we each be a light, dispelling darkness in compassionate and creative ways, paid for by people passionate about peace. We created and printed bumper stickers. Peace is patriotic. So we actually had some people in other parts of the country, Sangha members, writing and asking us to send them stickers, which we did, those bumper stickers. So there are so many things you can do. You don't have to sit and, at the same time, we just must do it from a place of love. We must do it because of coming from that place. If we are involved in politics, which many of us might be, or maybe we are people who say, oh God, I don't want to have anything to do with politics. And that might be because we don't like politicians, or we don't like what we see or what we hear. Then the work is to develop the understanding of those people we think that we don't like at all. Develop an understanding, reflect on, learn about, What's that man's background? What was his family life? Who is he? What is he really? And develop that compassion. That's not to say that I'm going to pat him on the back and say, job well done. I like what, I'm voting for you. No. But it is to have that understanding and to realize, as Ty has said, I remember him saying a lot, man is not the enemy. It's the energies of hatred, anger, ignorance. Just haven't met the conditions yet that would bring, the people I'm talking about right now would never attend something like this. Would never do it. What? Where's my AR-15? Let me just go out and fight for these rights. Fight. We don't want to fight. We don't want to resist. But we do want to be present, and we want to have that courage to be fully present with things as they are, and also to be fully present for any feeling or idea that comes that says, oh, yeah, why don't we do this? And work as a group. I've talked until I'm dry in the mouth. So now I'm going to take a very mindful swallow of that wonderful, clean water that all I have to do is go to the tap and get it. Actually, we do filter ours. We do know that here in Charleston County, we have some things in the water we just as soon not have in our body, although they probably are already there, but at least I don't have to add more to it. So I'm going to pay full attention to this, and I invite you, if you have a drink, to take a sip of something with me. First, we look at it with gratitude, realizing what it took to get this water into my hand. Yes, all I had to do was go in the kitchen and get it. It's there, and it's even cheap. They don't charge enough for it. But what did it take for it to get to that reservoir, or where did it come from? Deep in the ocean, deep in the earth. In Vietnam, I love that culture. It's one of the reasons I live there, I suppose. No one ever holds a glass of water or a drink just with one hand. That's a very casual thing to do while you're doing something else. You pay full attention. So Thai, the practice that we have from Plum Village from Thai comes right out of Vietnamese culture. When I pay for something, I've learned, piece of paper, I hand the money this way, both hands. I would never just hand my dollar bills, or in this case, my Vietnam dong, over to someone like that with one hand. Too casual, present. And it's received like this, with one hand, and the Vietnamese put the other hand here. Always one hand here, and they take it, and then they take it. It's a very lovely culture of people who are quite present. Not everybody, of course. And that certainly doesn't mean that everyone has a Buddhist practice. They don't. We can live in such a way that we have that kind of respect for ourselves and for everything and everyone in the same way. I think that's really, really, really important, that we develop a sense of respect and realizing that everything is sacred. The water is sacred. This laptop is sacred. This body is sacred. I'm not this body, but the body is sacred. It allows me to be here in this role, in this life. The same goes for you. So let's see, I might have talked way too long. Where are we? Dan, will you give me a heads up about what if we have more time, if I have more time?
I think we're right where we should be, Trish. You have as much time as you want. It's only 10:05. We're going to continue until 10:30. We'll allow 5 or 10 minutes for questions, so please continue.
All right. Okay. So let's see what comes. You know, Ty uses language like to help us to understand about individualism, that we're not a drop of, we can think of ourselves as a drop of water. But if we try to be that drop of water in the world, we'll soon evaporate. So we go as a river. We come together. We arrive at consensus together for everything that we do as a Sangha. We offer our presence to the Sangha. It's just never been more important. I mean, the absolute, in these days in particular, but maybe it's always been like this. It's never been more important, though, I think, than to engage, if you can, in Sangha building. And I'm not talking about what so many traditions in our world do. I'm not talking about going out and converting people to anything. I'm just talking about being inclusive. Inclusive. Inviting people, not hiding your light under a bush, not keeping your spiritual life, attempting to keep the spiritual life in your practice separate from the rest of your life. So often we do that, don't we? Or I see that with people sometimes in the Western world, in religion anyway. It's like the two, you see people doing things that, how is that compatible with your spiritual life or the religious life that you've chosen? So how to combine all of that so that you can 24/7, so that I can 24/7 really be the peace that I want to see. I have to be it in order to experience it. So I have to, and one way I do that is by practicing generosity. Some of you, those of you who know me, you've heard me share this. I was so fortunate to grow up with, to have been born to the parents I was born to, farmers in the very agricultural area, low country of South Carolina. We lived in the countryside, as the Vietnamese would say, 4 miles from town. We had a road, driveway, a dirt road that came up to our house. When we built that house when I was 12 years old, we planted little pine trees that were about that big. And of course now and for a long time, they're just giant pine trees. And my mother and father, they would see a car coming up the road, up the driveway, up the lane is what we call it in South Carolina. We would say that it's coming up the lane. And one would call out to the other. My father might call out, "Mammy, put on the coffee, a car's coming." Now think of that. Think of that. They didn't wait to see who. They didn't wait to see if that person was black or white or yellow or red. They didn't wait to see if it was man or woman. They didn't wait to see if they knew that person. They showed no fear. No fear at all. That wasn't to say that we didn't have, even then, in that part of the world. In fact, we had a lot of violence. That part of the world was where South Carolina is where the majority of the slaves came into this country, right here in Charleston and Beaufort. So we have a dark history. And as we know, the history comes right, is the present is made of the past and the future. So a lot of violence in that county, which was more than 50% Black. And when I was growing up, certainly not very happy people, still segregated. But my mother and father had no fear of any of that, and nothing negative that I recall I've ever known about. Nothing bad ever happened. We slept with our front door and back door unlocked. Didn't even lock the door. Left the house, didn't lock the door. Now that's another world, isn't it? But I have no doubt that one of the reasons that nothing happened to them was because they had no fear. My first teacher, my root guru, what Thai calls your root guru, is the person who births you spiritually. And my root guru was a very wise woman and psychotherapist. And how many times I've heard her say, maybe to me or to someone else in the group. So we had a Sangha, it was group therapy. She would say, we bring to us the very thing we fear the most. So you might want to reflect on that. What is your deepest fear? What do you fear about what's going on in the world? Or it might be what's going on in your family. What is your deepest fear? And then what's your other fear? Recognize that and accept that it's there. Don't try to push it away, but then spend time with it and try to understand it. Where's the root of that? Where's the root of that in me? And that is a way to dispel fear. Because very often when you do that, you'll see there's nothing to fear. This is just the world we live in. It's full of beauty. There's plenty of beauty and peace all around us. And that's what we focus on. So I'm I feel very, very strongly, and I do this in my own life, I want to focus on what I want. I put my energy into what I want. I put my energy into the world that I want, not what I don't want. If I put my energy into what I don't want, it grows. Why do you think Donald Trump is where he is? We did it as much as anyone else. If we read the news every day, we were with him in it. We created him. And plus, he's not separate from us. We all have a Donald Trump inside of us, as much as we don't like to believe that's true. I have one more thing I want to say that I think is important. In the guided meditation, Dan mentioned the ancestors. I think this is a time when, as we talk about going out into the world in peace and love, to remember our ancestors and that they are in us. Not just our mother and father, which I want to do. So I remember my mother and father and their strength and their courage and their belief in the goodness in the world. So I want to hold on to that. My grandparents, a lot of strength there, a lot of negativity there. I learn a lot from knowing about their lives. I learn a lot about myself, those energies that I have in me. But also the animal ancestors. So I practiced shamanism for several years before discovering Buddhism. And, one thing leads to another. So shamanism is all about nature, all about connecting with nature and feeling those energies inside of us. And in a trance dance out in California in about 1990, something I'd never done before, had no idea what was happening, but just went with the program. And the energy of bear, as I danced, the energy of bear came to me so that I had a vision and I felt like a big bear. I felt like a big, tall, standing up bear. Not angry, not vicious, but actually protective and loving. And it was the most amazing, one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. And so I earned the name Standing Bear. And bear became my totem animal, my spirit animal. And I called on that energy of bear a lot. Before this talk, I wanted to make sure that my throat was open and the words could come freely, the energy could flow freely. And so I did this. And I stood and I growled. And that opens the throat. But also I had the image of this big, loving, and bears do have that kind of personality. If you read about bears, they get a bad rap in the main media of being vicious and aggressive and better watch out, something else to fear. But actually, of course, they need to be treated with respect. But they're actually very loving, very family-oriented, very nurturing. They have a lot of patience, bears. They're known for their patience. The only quality I didn't seem to get from the bear that I'm aware of is I don't sleep a lot. I sleep at night, not for the whole winter. So with that, I will close. I hope that each of you heard something that might be of benefit